Hello and welcome back to the Shed Geek Podcast. Here's a message from our 2025 studio sponsor. Let's be real. Running a shed business today isn't just about building great sheds. The industry is changing fast. We're all feeling the squeeze, competing for fewer buyers while expectations keep climbing. And yet, I hear from many of you that you are still juggling spreadsheets, clunky software, or disconnected systems. You're spending more time managing chaos than actually growing your business. That's why I want to talk to you about our studio sponsor, ShedPro. If you're not already using them, I really think you should check them out. ShedPro combines your 3D configurator, point of sale, RTO contracts, inventory, deliveries, and dealer tools all in one platform. They even integrate cleanly into our Shed Geek marketing solutions. From website lead to final delivery, you can quote, contract, collect payment, and schedule delivery in one clean workflow. No more double entries, no more back and forth chaos. Quoting is faster, orders are cleaner. And instead of chasing down paperwork, you're actually running your business. And if you mention Shed Geek, you'll get 25% off all setup fees. Check it out at shedpro.co/ShedGeek. Thank you, ShedPro, for being our studio sponsor, and honestly, for building something that helps the industry.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Geek Podcast. And here we are just knocking them out today. 3 podcasts. We're on 2 out of 3 and excited for this conversation. Always a welcome guest. Someone I enjoy talking to just as much off the air as I do on the air. And you guys may know him. He's world renowned, or you know what? If not, he's at least kind of our friend and always pleasant to speak with. So, Tristan, what do you do, man? Tell the people about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, Shannon, thank you for having me back on the podcast. We really enjoy our relationship, and it's just it's been like 5 years now, you know. So the customer line logistics has a product called Cal, and Cal is basically, you know, think of Cal as like a good friend, somebody just kind of, you know, wanted to help you, you know, change the motor in your truck or give you a ride to the airport, or, you know, just kind of make your life a little simpler, but, you know, always there for you. And that's what we call the product Cal. And so we created some new products, Shannon, and we wanted to just kind of, you know, share them in the industry a little bit. And of course, you're, you know, a valuable marketing partner and you use one of our products, but also with Shed Geek Rentals. But also we advertise on your podcast because we recognize that if you want to get information out, you know, the Shed Geek Podcast is a great way to share your vision with your potential clients and what you're doing. And so we've got a few new products that I just wanted to, you know, hop back on with you and walk through some of the things that we've been working on in the last few months.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the kind words. We'll get the check in the mail, and always appreciate, you know, the kindness that you bring, and I think it's probably as much your as I say to the last guest, your ministry and just the way that you approach people is just as important a lot of times in business as the business itself. So I can't say any more kind things about, you know, you as well too, and appreciate those kind words. So tell me, what are some of the new things? I'm curious because like I'm a shed geek, and you do so many things. It's not even just the shed world. You do so many things, but I love to know how it pertains to sheds. So you have the floor, sir. I'm curious.
Well, that's great. So we've been hanging around for 4 or 5 years. We've been in logistics for 25 years, right? And then about a year ago, almost to the day, we sold our organic farm and home delivery company. And so we were delivering fruits and vegetables since 1998, developed our own software. And because I just love, you know, collaboration. Like, I just love that, right? So I'm always serving on committees or at the county meetings or in the farm world. And I just happened to stumble into this marketplace through Dave Ramsey of all things, right? Just, you know, we were in a mastermind group, and one of my co-masterminders, or whatever we called ourselves back then, was in the shed business, you know, and so we kept in touch over the years. And then when I started this new software company, because we recognized during the pandemic, people needed, you know, efficient tools. And so we were, you know, selling to like bagel companies and meal delivery companies because we were in the food space. And then I ended up talking to my friend Mike, and boom, he's like, "Can you help me?" I'm like, I mean, you deliver a box. I deliver a box of food. You deliver a box on a trailer. And that's close enough, and it's not close enough at all, Shannon. It is not close enough at all. But when somebody says, "Can you help me?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And so we started pivoting towards sheds, and we went to that first Shed Expo like 5 years ago, and it was in Grand Rapids that year. And there were a few people that were willing to work with us at that point, because we were kind of new to the marketplace, and we weren't very, I say, sheddy. We weren't very, we could do it, and we had some good tools, but it was still pretty clunky, right? And so then we have several clients now, and then last year we committed to rebuilding the interface to make it very shed specific, very sales specific. And so we spent a whole year retooling this. So now it's super clean and crisp, and it's only the tools you need to see. And so a lot of times the software has a bunch of extra stuff attached to it that doesn't really apply to you, but it comes with the platform you're on. And, and so people start clicking on things they shouldn't click on and end up over here and over there. And you're like, I'm like, So we took away, all that extra stuff that wasn't really pertinent for a salesperson to see or need, or an office person. And we just made it really clean. And, I like really good tools, and, the better the tool is designed to do the job it's supposed to do, it's worth it. But it has to be appropriately scaled, right? It has to make sense for your business. And so we have a farm, and we grew vegetables for years, right? And so I sold my distribution company essentially, and I still have my farm. I still have my equipment, Shannon. So last year we sat under the walnut tree, and we watched the sunset over the Cascades. I'm like, this is really nice. 25 years. I never looked up at that time because I'm here. Am I watering, weeding, looking for germination, planting something? Who had time to sit under the walnut tree and actually watch the sunset, right? But this year we decided to do a garden, right? So now I'm going from 10 acres of vegetables to a 40 by 60 foot plot, right?
Wow.
I have the same equipment to do, 100 acres really. So it takes longer for me to swap implements than to use them. To drop the mower, pick up the rototiller, pick up the spader, pick up the mower again, it just takes more time to actually swap it than to use it, but it's still fun to get back in that tractor and drive, So I work the soil more than I probably should because I've got the tool on and I don't want to swap it again, right? So really I just need a nice Troy-built rototiller at this point. So I'm not scaled any longer for a 40 by 60 foot garden, right? And our software really, when I think about it, we now are the opposite. We can do a 60, 80, 100 acre farm. We can handle 20, 30, 40, 100 dealers. But one of the things that I've discovered is that nobody really serving the steel industry, as well. So we have these three tools. We have the hub, the transaction hub, Cal Central, and Cal Complete. And so these are the three new products that we've been working with. And they're not based on your revenue. They're based on the tools you need. So if you just need a Troy-built rototiller, the transaction hub probably is perfect for you. But if you need maybe a little bit more, say you need inventory, then the Cal Central works. And if you need a full-blown system, then the Cal Complete product works, right? And then we have the integrations in the RTO industry. Well, there's like a dozen of them now. And so we have an RTO hub product just for contract origination. Not for contract management. It exports into RTO Smart or it exports into RTO Pro or your own in-house solution. It just helps you get a contract from your dealers, a digital contract. So you don't have to wait for snail mail or fax or, but basically those are the ways you get them, and we just made that easier to do. And so we have these 4 products in the industry that serve the industry. And because we're connected to Shed Pro and Idea Room, we also have that engine. So if you just need to be able to create a contract, because say you're a dealer selling just steel buildings, all you really need to do is to get your hash mark, your building ID from your Shed Pro or Idea Room email and drop it in our system. And then it creates a customer, and then you can walk it through to your RTO partner and, and place the order there. And so we inadvertently created a really nice steel product that doesn't have a lot of extra stuff in it, because you really just need to get a drawing and a contract signed. And then we have a little bit of order management in there, just to, so you can cancel orders, modify orders. But, for the most part, all those guys want to do in their dealers is just really, let me get my drawing, make sure it's correct, and then let me send the contract to the RTO company or finance. And so we're really excited about this product, because it's going to make it easier for dealers to actually, sell their buildings. So manufacturer with 100 dealers or 200 dealers, this product would be great for them. So I'm excited about that one in particular.
Digital Shed Builder is an online shed configurator that strives to provide incredible visual quality, fantastic customer service, and an amazingly low price point, making it a perfect fit for any shed dealer looking to increase their online sales. Digital Shed Builder is simple to use, taking less than 5 minutes to integrate on your site. The Get a Quote feature streamlines your sales process, showing you exactly what your potential customers need. They offer a highly customizable experience that accurately represents your brand and unique shed offerings, working with you directly to set up everything you need in a configurator. With no extra startup cost, no lengthy contracts or commitments, and no hidden fees, Digital Shed Builder has been created with quality, simplicity, and affordability in mind.
No, I love it. I was writing down so many things here as you're talking. Metaphor came up as I love the metaphor and the way that you break down the different systems and the uses. Because one thing that we found with I will go on record here deep enough to say, I think we're a bit of a tech adverse, industry as a whole. So that is a bit what makes us different. Maybe some of that is the playing community, but maybe some of that's even just the conservative nature. I was laughing. I really don't want to get on politics, but I will use this. I'll use this metaphor just because I think it's simple enough for people to grasp. I was laughing because, you always hear the Republican Party is called the party of no, right? No, 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 nothing new, no, nothing new, right? And that conservative nature of us, I think about how that spills over and how it's relatable in things like our neck of the worlds, especially in the tech world. And I wrote up this nice little, I don't know what you'd call it, just this little segment in Shed Sales Professionals the other day where I was talking about, oh, me and you just talked about this, like before you got on here, like Zoom. Oh no, where's the settings to this? With Safari, and then here's the browser and the user interface. And what happens is, like I think back to my in-laws, and I remember we were talking about getting a computer, and they were like, why would anyone ever have a computer in their home? That doesn't make any sense. And then it turned into the internet. It was like, why would anyone want the internet? And now it's AI, and it's like, oh no, that's the worst thing ever. And maybe one of these things really are going to be the worst thing ever. I don't know. But now today, like my mother-in-law sits on her computer a lot, orders off Amazon, right? And tells me about her, load speed as I come over there. And all of a sudden it's like these things are progressing. Even my 75-year-old father-in-law, he's like, I got to put in an hour playing solitaire on this old computer every day because he just loves it for some reason. And I think we're resistant to change in that conservative, and that's where I'm drawing the metaphor like you did as the party of no. We're resistant to change. We're resistant to anything new. We're resistant to anything that can help. And we often even criticize it because we don't understand it. And right. You're in the tech space, right? You're in the tech space and how it meets this world. And it's like,
as a farmer,
yes. You use that farming like application to say, wait a minute, I can use technology mixed with this farming and agricultural world to benefit and scale and do more. And that's really the same thing we're talking about here at the most simple, just place, right? Just from our base, we're just talking about trying to create systems and processes to help you have more time, be more successful, and scale in ways that you can't do as one individual in a 24-hour period. Is that fair?
It's fair for sure. And, technology is, whether it's a car or a gun or, a cement mixer, like all those things could be used for evil.
Yes.
Technology can be used for evil, but it can be used for a ton of good, right? I mean, and so it depends on how you apply the technology. We want to take tools in the industry that help you actually do your job better. And one of the things about our tools that's really helpful. So take my story, right? I'm like almost 60. A lot of the shed companies, steel companies, they're not too far away from my age. Mom and dad started this, or they taken it over from their parents or whatever. But so there's another transition coming. Like there's a succession coming in the next 10 or 15 years in the shed industry, because it's going to have to either be sold or it's going to have to be taken over by the next generation. So, we have 9 children. They all worked in the business. They all worked on the farm. They all paid for their own cars. They all got their Roths set up, because we believed in paying our kids. And so we had 1 or 2 that were going to lean into our business a little bit, right? Because we knew their skill sets. They worked with us, but there were several that were not built, created by God to be farmers and or wholesale, food buyers and distributors, right? That this was not going to be their skill set. And so we just wanted our children to launch into their world, right? The farm was a part of it. Their parents, what they did growing up was a part of their story, but it wasn't going to be the end of their story. And so we just released them to whatever their passions were. And we've got them all over the place, but there was 1 or 2 that leaned in, right? And then in particular, we had one daughter who married a firefighter. And one day, and this is me being a collaborator, one day the firefighter extinguisher testing guy shows up at my farm and says, it's time to do your annual inspection on your fire extinguisher. And he's in his 70s. He can barely walk, right? He's like, yeah, what are you going to do with your business one day? And you go, well, I got to sell it to somebody, but I want somebody to take care of it. And so I said, well, I'll have my daughter call you, right? And so the one daughter who probably could take over my company, whose husband's a firefighter, I said, do you want to buy this business? And she looked at it, and they're in the space. They understand extinguishers. They understand relationships. They've been in people business. It's a recurring model. Every month they go to the big mills, and every year they go to the small companies. And so when she and her husband agreed to buy that business from that older gentleman, it was gone. Like my chance to sell to a child or bring a child on was gone. So then I had to pivot. But what I had to do to get ready to move was I had to change my name from Classic Family Farms 5 years ago to Box of Good. I had to begin to set my company up so that it wasn't tied to me any longer, so I could potentially move it to another family member potentially, or to another buyer. And we had a large company want to buy us, and I just didn't feel right about selling to a private equity firm, for lack of a better word, right? Like because we're a small family business. And also I didn't want to work for that company, right? And that's how that game works. Usually you sell, but then you run it for them. And I wanted to, do something different. And so I ended up selling it to 2 other close friends in the community that were in a similar space who worked on our software. But I had to put in play the plan 5 years before, in case one of my children didn't want to do it, right? So I changed the name of our company and I rebranded. And today it's still known as Classic Family Farms. You can't get rid of it because you spent all these years building it, but it's Box of Good, right? And so when they took it over, because we built these systems also, they didn't show up for 30 days after the sale. And I didn't either, but the employees that I had trained and the software we had built kept going. They just, because they were busy running other companies, and all of a sudden, they got a new company, but they didn't have to be on the ground. And so building the right systems, putting in play, a name change, the systems, and then, finding the right buyer for the right, person to buy our company, it all worked. And so we are there in the shed industry. There's always somebody who needs to begin to exit, and if you're 50, think about it now. And if you're 60, definitely think about it now, but what are you going to hand off to your children or the next buyer? And so that's why I'm in this space today in many ways, is because I understood the logistics, but I've lived this story myself. And so if they're really wise, they won't do what I did, which was, start a new startup when you're 55.
I understand. I get it. I do. I promise.
But I love this space, and it's serving people, but helping them actually think through succession planning. Like I would just love to do that. Like, and so when you sign up
Yeah.
with Cal as a product, we want to just help you, create the best system possible, centralize your products, your processes, and then at some point make it easier to hand off to a child who gets it, you know, or to another buyer because your systems are working, right? And so that's what we would love to do with our product is help you streamline, centralize your processes with your existing network, right? You and I talked about it, Shannon. Cal is probably one of the tools out there that actually is open to multiple integrations. I mean, we have a Smart Pay and JMeg and Check Geek Rentals and Easy Pay Buildings and RTO Pro integration and a Smart RTO Smart integration, and then we have Shed Pro and Idea Room. If you're not on our partner list, just ask. The only reason we have these partners is because our clients wanted to keep their existing network. They wanted to work with people they worked with for 20 years or 30 years or 10 years. And we were saying, yeah, we will bring in your partners. We'll be happily add your network to our system so you can maintain your relationships and the way you do business. We'll just make it online. And so that's been super rewarding. And now we're one of the few companies, really, Shannon, out there in this order management space that's connected to multiple configurators, connected to multiple RTO partners, and has that order management piece in the middle. And I wouldn't want it any other way.
Hey, I'm Clark Paquette, one of the founders of Calculate Business Services. If you're in the portable storage building industry, you already know how much is going on behind the scenes. Managing lots, tracking sales, keeping up with cash flow, and staying on top of your books. It's a lot. That's where we come in. At Calculate, we specialize in helping businesses like yours with bookkeeping, accounting, tax prep, business support, and even fractional C-level services, like having a part-time CFO or COO on your team without the full-time price tag. We know this industry, and we understand its unique challenges. Our team helps you stay organized, make smarter decisions, and keep your business running smoothly so you can focus on building and selling. Whether you're just starting out or scaling fast, we've got the tools, the team, and the experience to help you grow. And to get the conversation started, we're offering a free 30-minute consultation. No pressure, just real help. Visit calculatellc.com and click Contact Us to schedule your session today. Let's grow your business together.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to do it because, in your industry, in the shed industry, right? In this industry we're in, or steel, or whatever, there are just different products. There are different processes. I have RTO companies who tell me that the way that somebody does their down payments is not right. And you have to do a CRA this way. I just tell them, we just help you create your contract. In the end, you're going to get sued. And so your attorney is going to represent you. So if your attorney says CRA is the way to go, then you do that. And if yours says greater initial payments is the way to go, you do that. We just want to help you do your contract, right? Yeah. I don't have to worry about, arguing with anybody about anything because we're building your network with your contracts, for your product you want to serve. And so I'm super excited about where we are as a company, right?
Makes absolute perfect sense. And me and you just have so much in common, like that. I just find out even through these calls that are amazing. Like my daughter married a firefighter too. So, it's so funny whenever I find out these fun little tidbits and things like that. And one of the things you talked about was Box of Good and Classic Family Farms and talking about branding and just how important that is. And that's something that's just been a staple for us. We've tried to create a brand that, like you, has been built on collaboration, and look, I like to tell people we were collaborating in the shed industry when it wasn't cool, right? You know what I mean? Like we were doing it when it wasn't cool. We were recognizing competition holds its special place. And competition is such a good thing because what it does, it keeps us all honest and makes us better. Because when someone comes out with a product, I've been asked for years, and trust, look, we're in year 5 now of the podcast. We've got over 300 episodes out here of content. It's all free content for people to just listen to, and hopefully it's helpful, whether it's storytelling or whether we get into the weeds and start showing you demos of, what I'm saying, of like your product and the back ends of how things operate, so people understand it more. But the point is, we want to collaborate for success. Competition helps to keep us in line, but there's a way to do it. right? There's a way to compete. And I think you can compete with integrity. I think you can compete with, and it's really hard when you get into the world of business, because some people say, well, it's just business. It's just business is always kind of unique to me, because I'm like, it's never just business ever, really, because like this is served as like I don't put my company in a box, my Jesus in a box, and then my life in a box, or my family in a box. Like they all intertwine so much that it's inseparable, and I don't really know how to do that. And then so then you just have to, and I know people understand this message because I've had so many conversations that'll never turn into podcasts, that they tell me, how do I navigate through this? What do I do about this relationship? And I'm like, well, we all deal with that. One, lead with the Lord first and mind. Pray, ask for discernment, and listen. So that's always the first answer, obedience. But the second is, like maybe approach business different. The cool thing about being a conservative industry is that like we should be able to come together and have conversation that is like easy, and it doesn't have to be like even if it's difficult. We encourage on Shed Sales Professionals page, as an example, all the time, healthy debate, good constructive criticism that helps make us better. Always welcome. Always welcome. Little different when we.
What you're talking about is the golden rule in some ways, right? Or just weights. Sometimes the Bible talks about just weights, right? If you come to the table and if you're just trying to win, that's not going to necessarily be the best approach long term, right? And so you want to be able to equitably, balance that relationship. So in some ways, I want you to be even more successful in our conversation. Like I want to help you get to your next plateau. I'll also benefit from this relationship, but really my goal is for you to be a better Shannon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and if we can't come together, then it's okay. It's just not meant to be a relationship. And I'm at peace with that. Right. Because not every shed manufacturer or every wholesale shed buyer, distributor is going to be a cow customer. But whether they sign up or not, if I can leave that conversation healthier, potentially better, offered some advice, or potentially even glean something to help make my product better,
right?
It's okay. It's still a win, And so if you come holding it loosely, right? Like this may go somewhere, may not go somewhere, but it's still better for the moment. It's a win. Last night at our Bible study, I've been I facilitate. I don't lead. I facilitate. I draw out conversations. We're in Acts 2, right? The Holy Spirit is now descended upon the apostles and the 120 believers, and Jesus, the last thing he said before he leaves, basically just share the gospel to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the outer ends of the world, right? And so now we're seeing in the first century church the Holy Spirit being released to these believers, right? And Peter delivers this amazing sermon. But when I was talking to my group last night, I'm like, really Jerusalem for us today is church, because there are people who come because of grandma or a wife or their children go to youth group there, but they're not really believers, but they're there every Sunday because it's, what they do. And I said, let's just start praying for Jerusalem as our church and, and beginning to just have their ears opened up so they can actually hear the truth that they've been listening to for maybe even decades, but have never committed to Jesus, and they're just like, also is like, oh, whoa, you're right. Because then we can go into our communities and then we can go outside the state and we can go wherever, right? But really people are coming every Sunday to church who haven't really committed their lives to Jesus yet, so why not just, work on, those people that are bumping elbows with. And so it was so powerful in many ways for those people to start thinking about evangelism in a positive way and also in a non-scary way, right? Because it's like, these are people I know, and in the end, they're not going to be converts to Shannon or Tristan. Lord knows one Tristan's plenty for this world, right? We don't need any more of me, but we need more of others, right? We need their skill sets, their passions, their personalities, to come into the fold so then they can share the gospel with other people, but make their lives better.
Have you ever just had a moment that God really spoke to you on something that's like a prayer or something that you've really been waiting to get an answer on for a long time?
Yeah.
You're going to find this interesting, but the conversation that me and you just had really, really, really tapped into something for me that I was like, wow, I have an idea, I have a thought, and I have like just beyond that, like I kind of got goosebumps right now about like this. Yeah, I really appreciate you. We'll just have to talk about that off air. But you're talking about something earlier about the new generations in tech, and there's a passage in the Bible that says, there came a generation that did not know God or the works of God, talking about, in Israel, and like, and Moses promised to for them to receive the promised land. And the reality is that's kind of, if we draw that metaphor to that tech side, like we have 400 plus playing community members who call in on our landline, like every week and listen to an episode of the podcast. They take their time, they stand out there on the phone, and they are willing to consume content to try and better themselves, right? To try and better themselves for their craft. And honestly, I don't understand why when people don't. I mean, I get my hands on everything in the shed industry that I can to try and understand it more, because I even did this whenever I was just in sales all the time. When I worked as a sales manager, whatever it was, you know what I'm saying? Like I was always like, I want to know that collaboration. The reason I say I was doing it before it was cool. I used to go sit down and talk to my competition and be like, y'all got some really cool buildings. Like, I wish we had these buildings. This is awesome. Like, what's your experience? That was natural. That wasn't difficult work or targeted. Did I learn through it? Yes, of course. But, and that's one thing I've always appreciated about you is like your approach to business is really, really, really like saturated in your love for God. And like you've always used that as a catalyst, as a starting point. So for me, just to give you, like, I've always appreciated that. But let's get into the weeds a little bit. Like, tell me, break down a little bit more the transaction, because this is the newest piece to Cal. So break that down in whatever detail is necessary.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me just, like we shared earlier, we kind of stumbled into this industry, with all the tools to serve in this industry, but fully not understanding the industry. And sometimes being from the outside is actually, it's another perspective that comes, right? And so now we've got inside information because we've worked with some really great manufacturers, wholesale shed buyers, RTO companies. And so we understand how they think, and then now we're folding in our experiences. And so after that 3 or 4 year education, we finally felt like we understood what they really wanted or what the marketplace was asking for. And so we ended up creating these products. And so the Transaction Hub initially, when we were designing it, was designed to be a tool for smaller manufacturers who wanted to wade into technology. Because, you can, there's no inventory here, but you can create a manual building. You can go and type in, 8x12 garden shed, red trim, blue siding, black roof, and then you could, put a serial number on and sell it, right? And then you can attach it to your RTO partner.
Hello, today we're going to take a look at iFab's component saw system. So we're utilizing a DeWalt chop saw. We've put it on sliders, easily to adjust. We've automated it using pneumatics so that we can run all these saws together using one actuator. We can either actuate with a 2-hand safety control here or a foot pedal. The 2-hand safety control comes with board clamps here, so to clamp in your board so you're totally hands-free. We've got digital readout up here to find your angle as well as your length. So we have a 90-degree saw here for your super long angle cuts. We've also got a conveyor on this system to take away your cutoffs. This system is completely modular. We can add as many saws as you need. The rails can be as long as you need.
For more information, visit www.ifabllc.com.
And so we just, begin to think, okay, how can we make it easier for, people to wade into technology? And then you can upgrade to our Cal Central product. And essentially then you get customer information, you get inventory at various lots. And if you're a shed company, you need inventory as kind of a base component to your building. But if you're not, and this is where the product distinction became really clear to us, is that in the steel industry in particular, those guys are always selling virtual buildings. They are always drawing something, creating an idea room or shed pro building, and then selling it. And then their job's kind of finished, right? It gets handed off to manufacturer. And so we had inadvertently, knowing that was out there, because we have dealers who sell steel buildings and carport manufacturers, but we said, whoa, we just created a really nice, clean product for a dealer to log into their idea room or shed pro and walk an order through the system and have some limited exposure to it. And so if you don't mind, I'll just share this new screen and people can just see how crisp it is. And so I will, I'm going to try my Zoom etiquette here and see what's happening. Entire screen, this one here, perfect. And then I will pop over to this product. Can you see this, Shannon?
Yep, I've got it.
So look at over here, Shannon. This is like super clean. Like there's nothing here other than what you need, right? And so as a manufacturer of a carports, you could create, multiple stores and users here. So you can sign up your whole inventory here, and then everybody comes to this dashboard right here where they start their orders. And the dashboard is really nice because it tells you what you've been working on. It tells you any quotes you've got in the system. It tells you, where the status of these orders are. And not everybody uses the statuses, but if a company does, they're here. And, at any moment, you can just click on this and go right back to that order, and you can work on it if you want to, or if it was a quote. And so now this screen here is super clean. We used to have 2 screens for this, and now we just have 1 screen. So we have the building details here, what kind of deal it is. Here's a build, so it's a custom order. What payments were taken. What RTO company is it going to go to potentially? You want to see the rent-own agreement? It's right here. You want to see an actual invoice? It's right here. And so at this point here, if you're a dealer, this is everything you need to know about that deal. And then if you need to do some changes to it, you can either modify it and take it back to the checkout again, or you can cancel the order and start over. But all you really need to do is a little bit of order management. And so this tool is simple for that. It doesn't require, a bunch of delivery information, a bunch of inventory information, and extra tools that are like, stacking up down here on this sidebar, because that's just not your world. And so what's really nice about this is when you start in your dashboard, you can create a quote or create an order, super simple, or you could actually, go to Idea Room or Shed Pro here, and you can click on this import design, and then you can pick the configurator if you have multiple. So if you were selling carports and sheds and you had a configurator for both, you could do that. But you just grab your configurator and you just import in the design link from your email, and it will automatically start this checkout and create the customer for you. It is really simple to do that. Or you can go right back up to the configurator right here, and then you can start the checkout. So you can use your Idea Room or Shed Pro tools all day long and bring that order in when it's finalized, or you can start in Cal and you can do that if you want to. And then of course, if you were like a shed manufacturer or a shed, selling sheds, you can go through here and you can do serial number, the price of the building, the style of the building, size, color, and you can upload any photos if you wanted to. Like if you got a repo on the lot yesterday, Shannon, you appreciate this about the RTO industry. If you had a repo come back on your lot and somebody said, I want to buy that building right now, you could just come right here and type in those specs and start a contract, and be on your way. I mean, super simple to do that. So you could even do existing inventory this way if you wanted to. So you wouldn't even have to, have the inventory product. But if you wanted inventory, we have the Cal Central product, and that adds in, inventory on different lots and things like that. But if you just really want to be able to create a product like this, that's super easy to do. And the customer is super simple too. You're already going to write this information down, first name, last name, email, phone number, delivery address, or you're already going to create that super easy. So, you just do that, and it tracks all the way through the system if you do that. And so I'll go back here to the orders. And so now you can view your orders in a couple of ways. You can view them as a list order. You can sort them to processing or draft. And so if you just want to grab an order and walk it back to the checkout, what's a good one for that? I'll just grab this one right here. Here I can just modify this building. So this one, I want to make a change to it. I modify it. It'll open back up in the checkout. And then I can take it right back to, in this case, Idea Room for editing. Or I could add a ramp to this. I could add a discount for, a delivery fee, or a discount, a senior discount, a military discount. I can switch between buy outright and rent to own, and it will change the tax structure of that issue. And whatever RTO company you have, we have some clients who use 4 different RTO companies. And the reason why they use 4 different RTO companies is because they sell decks, carports, sheds, and play sets. And every RTO company has a different flavor and products they want to work with. And so, if you had multiple RTO companies you worked with, there'd be a drop down here and you'd select the right one for the right product at that moment. And then you just walk this through this system. So Shannon, I'm a big fan of clean, crisp tools. But in our world now, you're not buying tools you don't need any longer, right? You're just going to pay for the suite of tools that make sense for your company. And if you need inventory, then just go to the Cal Central product. And if you need a full-blown order management system, then you can go to the Cal Complete product. And that's why, this collaboration stuff's so exciting, because if we didn't have Idea Room, if we didn't have Shed Geek Rentals, right, if we didn't have JMeg or SmartBay, we wouldn't be able to take all these partners and pieces and learn from them, and then now build a conduit to each of them to do a better job of serving the customer in front of the salesperson. Because without a sale, none of this matters. If we don't close a deal on a building of some sort, there's nothing for the manufacturer to do. There's nothing for the marketers to do, right? We really need to get a really easy way to sell a building. And for us, that order management point of sale solution, oh man, I love that. I love making processes simpler. And now you can do that when you're on vacation. When you're traveling to, a shed haul or bash in Oklahoma, you could log in and you could sell a building, check out an order from right there because it's all Wi-Fi, right? And the next generation can use their phones. They can work from any place. They're not tied to paper. But even if you want to use paper, you could just upload it into our system and take a wet signature on an existing invoice that you've been using and, add that to the system as well. So we have ways for you to do it old school, new school, collaborated school. I don't care, right? We just want to help you transition. But you're going to have to transition if you want to grow your business and if you want to transition to the next generation. They're going to need different tools. And so for us, in addition to clean tools, it's really important to remember that we want your network to come into our system. We want you to keep those same relationships. We're not asking you to switch RTO companies. We're not asking you to switch configurators. I mean, if you want to, that's fine. We're not saying you can't. But if you really want to keep a certain relationship, we want you to keep that as well. And so we'll find a way to integrate it into our system. And then now we have those clients, like we were talking about earlier, 4 or 5 RTO companies. That's complex to keep track of. But really, when you have a chicken coop or a play set or a shed, not all RTO companies play in those sandboxes.
I wanted to, because I want to make sure we address the carport in the middle. So I wrote this down so that I get back to that conversation. But I even wrote down the 4 different RTO companies because I really wanted to save this conversation for my next guest, and we're going to have it again with Nick Gerard. Nick is if I understand it correctly, the first time we interviewed him, he has the official position of the general counsel for the NSRA, rebranded NSRA from the NBSRA. And Nick, deals with a lot of these things. I know Ed has been, a big part of, the industry for so long. I always hear that he's retiring, but he's still so present because he's so valuable to this industry. We actually have an interview with him at the NBSRA that we didn't get to air because there was so much background noise, and it's dreadful because it was such a good interview and you guys don't ever hear it, unfortunately. But we keep getting Nick on, to have a conversation about it and especially talk about RTO at a high level. But I've been thinking about this and I wanted to save this conversation with him because it was RTO specific, but this is a good example of how all of these things affect us. You know what I'm saying? The leg bone's connected to the knee bone, right? It's just, you can't make one move without, having to think about how it's going to affect something else. And this is a conversation I have for you. I'm curious about this with the 4 different RTO companies. Different ones have different flavors. They do certain things. What are your thoughts on a direct-to-consumer rent-to-own approach? What I mean by that is so many of the relationships are held with if you went to the bank and you got a loan, just a private loan, put up collateral or whatever, you go to the store and you say, hey, I've got, up to $8,000 I can spend. what shed can I get? Most people don't care what bank you went to because finance doesn't really have as much of a impact in the industry as rent to own does. But like if someone came and said, "Hey, I was sent here by XYZ rental company," can that salesperson then sell that shed, or is this relationship in such a way that it's like, "Oh no, we're vertically integrated. We have to sell this, this shed," or maybe the RTO company owns our inventory, or maybe the RTO company has us on a contract, or whatever it is. Would it be healthy for the John Q public to just be able to go shop where they want to shop? If they're being sent there by the RTO provider, who's already has the financing piece to that, because your system would be able to help with that tremendously, because you can just let in any RTO company. It doesn't matter if you use 10 different RTO companies, and it creates good, healthy competition too. So that's maybe the opposite of collaboration. And there's maybe some bigger thoughts. I really want to get Nick's thoughts on it later today. I've asked everybody, but
I have some thoughts.
As a tech guy, I'm curious,
Yeah. Well, not every manufacturer and RTO company see the same way. They see it the same way, right? So not everything's a good fit always, right? And so for an RTO company to sort of take a blanket amount of money and give it to a pre-approved buyer, so to speak, like a line of credit, what do you do about repos potentially? What do you do about inventory? What do you do if they don't buy in your area? And so like there's some geographic limitations. And then, maybe that manufacturer doesn't work with that RTO company for whatever reason, right? Or maybe the RTO company doesn't work with that manufacturer for whatever reason. So there would be some things to work out like that. You probably could, regionally develop that. But in the end, the RTO company has to be comfortable with the inventory that's being purchased. And that's one reason why the industry is kind of built like it is, because maybe they just don't want to have that kind of building where they can't pick it up, or maybe that community needs to have 2 payments down versus 1 payment down, or, and then, can it be cash? So I think that there's actually a place to play in that sandbox. It's kind of like a home equity line of credit in some ways, and in our industry, the RTO industry, some, RTO companies now that we work with, they want to buy a Cal product for selling sheds because they have their own repos, right? They get them back and they need to place some. Other people have just sold them back to the manufacturer, right? And so they eliminate that step. But some people actually have to resell buildings they pick up, and so now they're like, well, we need a Cal product to sell our contracts back to ourselves. Because, in one case, the RTO company, takes a repo building to a lot, and then they use a different company for RTO when they sell that building. And they're like, wait a second, why wouldn't you give it back to me? Well, there's not a path back to him, right? Or this RTO company is like, well, if I had your product, then they could log into my system and sell my building back to me and I can rent it out. So it's really interesting that. So is there a place to play potentially in a financing world where the building wasn't tied maybe to a repo? Or the language was, in the contract that, the manufacturer will buy it back at a discount from us and we will refund you whatever price of the building so you can then sell it again.
Well, here's the good thing. In my mind, the good thing is the risk is on the RTO company if there's no repo network. It doesn't really matter, right? All it really matters to the manufacturer, the salesperson, is that they get the sale. They don't have to deal with it if it comes back. It's the RTO company's already taking the understanding of that risk and saying, well, it's not your problem. We'll deal with it. So it doesn't matter if you have anything set up or not. We'll deal with it.
Running a business can feel like trying to balance a dozen plates, except none of them are actually plates, and one of them's on fire. Enter Newfound Solutions. Think of us like your business BFF, always ready to lend a hand with whatever you need. Have you always wanted to start your own rent-to-own company but don't quite know where to start? RTO Partners is here to help. Overwhelmed by all the moving pieces in running your own rent-to-own program? RTO Smart is a software that encompasses everything you need on one platform. Or leave the rent-to-own up to us and focus on what's more important to you. Newfound Rentals has you covered with traditional rent-to-own options for your customers. Shed Connect understands the complexity of the digital marketplace. We take the hassle out of online sales. And unlock the full potential of your brand with Co-Creative. We'll make your brand look so good, your audience won't be able to look away. Newfound Solutions. 5 powerful sub-brands helping you succeed across every aspect of your business. Visit newfoundsolutions.com today and let us do the balancing so you don't have to.
It'd be the customer then would have to figure out if the building met the RTO company's underwriting standards. Probably would be where the conversation would just have to go. But that could be figured out. It could be like an on-the-fly thing where you get pre-approved, and then maybe you get a list of manufacturers or a region you can sell. I think that that's doable, Shannon. I feel like if the consumer is savvy enough to go to the RTO company first.
Well, and I think that's the key. I think the key is that in most cases they won't find the RTO company. The RTO company will find them, right?
Right.
And I think that just comes down to good marketing, right? So,
Well, and
if
the
you know how to
RTO
get in front of customers.
The RTO company, much like the shed company, has now a record, in our world anyway, of the purchase. And so they could go back and market to somebody who had a building 5 years ago. And if they were a good client, they could say, oh, this person never missed a payment. We're going to extend them a voucher to go out and buy another building, potentially, right? So they could do, much like a shed company could do, just market to their client list of existing buyers, and maybe just touch them every 3 to 5 years with an offer like that. So that would be really a valuable tool, Shannon. I think that could open up the door to more sales. And then it could also give us sort of the parameters at that point, take it to these manufacturers or these dealers, to use this coupon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that actually, and I'm glad you brought that up, Shannon. I think that's a really unique opportunity for marketing for RTO companies to maybe even generate more, better sales,
Well, we've talked about it, and the one thing I get is like, well, just like with the podcast, I've got a couple friends here listening to this. Don't take this so personal, friends. Don't take this so personal. I got a couple that are like, we tried this, and I'm like, yeah, but I mean, like, we got told a podcast wouldn't work. We got told marketing in this industry wouldn't work. We got told a lot of things wouldn't work. That we were able to break through the barrier on some things. So I think sometimes it's just your systems and processes and working with people who have like the mindset to say, like, let's explore. How does it benefit us? Not necessarily. To me, it's more of a benefit of the industry as a whole. It's not just looking at our bottom line. It's like saying, because, like there's this conversation about the unhealthiness of premiums and different things that are being added to the rent-own world because it's so competitive. That's like, how do we scale that down and not have a race to the bottom? Like, even if it costs us our bottom dollar, like, to me, that's the true mark of business is like, there's 2 schools of thoughts here. Help myself first, help the industry first. And like, you're going to have to put yourself maybe in one of those camps. And like, we put ourselves in the camp of like, help the industry first, because if we help the industry, we will be helped. We know that. It's Zig Ziglar, help other people get what they want so you can get what you want. So like, we're service based. How do we serve you the most? And then that benefits us in the end. So
I think you couldn't do it any different anyway, Shannon. Like, I don't think that you could actually not just serve the person in front of you. Like, I don't see that that's even in your DNA. Let's talk about the industry a little bit. Like during the pandemic, we had material surcharges through the roof. Like, you print, your brochures because the prices changed overnight, right? You just had to
true.
put a surcharge. And then, what happened at the beginning of this year with tariffs? Surcharges. Nobody even knows what's going to happen in the next 6 months on pricing.
Especially on the steel side, it's so unpredictable.
Well, doors and windows, the plastic. And so there's just a ton of stuff going on in this world. And so we're back to like a dynamic, industry where pricing is in flux and nobody can really forecast as easily as they used to because they don't know the prices. And so a system like Cal or any other system kind of in that order management makes it easier to absorb these order managements because your pricing can be just immediately updated, right? If you change it in Shed Pro ID room, it automatically changes in Cal. If your RTO company needs to change their divisors, it automatically changes in Cal, right? If you need to update an existing inventory, you can update that price in Cal. You could just add a material surcharge as a line item if you wanted to, right?
That's so valuable.
That's an important tool right there. But also think about our pricing structure. We sell a suite of tools, right? So we're $249, $399, $799, or maybe we're $499. And that's based on the tools you need, not on your revenue. you're not going to tip into a different revenue bucket if you sell one more shed because of a 40% price increase you had to pass on. If you didn't sell one more building, it doesn't matter because our pricing is not based on revenue. Because really, when it's a $2,000 shed or a $20,000 tiny home, that extra zero doesn't take any more data. What takes data actually is users, complexity, deliveries. Those are the things that take up the space in our systems. And so pricing on like a unit-based cost, is actually, in my mind, the most equitable. I was so irritated at Visa that they took 3% on the next $1 million I sold. What did they do to grow my business to get that extra raise, right? And it was the same in the shed industry. You sold buildings 40% higher. Maybe you didn't sell any more buildings. You sold 40 buildings, but you had to sell them for 40% more because price increases. All of a sudden, your revenue went up and everybody else's sales went up to you as well. Your order management solution, if it's based on revenue, went up. Maybe you didn't sell more buildings. So when we talked to Kyle Summers, a friend of yours, and at JMEG, he said, Tristan, if you can figure out how to price your product on units sold, and so if you sell it for, $2,000 or $20,000, we just charge a $10 order management fee. Just $10. And we do all that stuff in the middle that you need and connect all your parts together for that, right? So we have a base.
So many companies, especially when they're small, they desire that static pricing because, like when scalability happens, they want to know like we're not going to pay the farm, right? Because I know, and it's a thought. It's a really big thought because there are some who even advertise with us who are like, oh, I adamantly reject that thought, and like some that like, oh, that's absolutely the way to go. And it's like, how do we compromise and come to a solution on what that is? And I think the answer at the end of the day is you just have to do what's best for your customer. I think you have to listen, right? Listen, because you got to be able to take that advice and you got to be able to allow for criticism and opinion. But at the end of the day, it's what is best for your customer, right?
Yeah, and that's my pricing model because that's the kind of business owner I sort of am, right?
Yeah.
Some products like, we looked at doing HubSpot, but as soon as you tip into HubSpot's like services, it starts to scale hard. Like you're saying, I can't quite afford that, right? And so for us, we thought, well, as a business owner, what kind of pricing would make me comfortable, right? And a base plus a flat fee per order, you just know your costs. You just know right now how simple that's going to be.
It's kind of similar to the conversation about, D2C, direct to consumer, because, like you're using the spirit of competition to benefit the industry. They're here for the customer. Ultimately, I mean, what's going to happen is like, you're not going to have you don't have to have like the loyalty in such a way, like loyalty is a good thing. What I'm saying is like, you don't have to have the loyalty in such a way that we only use one bank for the entire industry. Or like we only use RTO company, or we only use one software. It creates competition that makes the rest of us go back and improve. And listen, I know people like don't like that because you want to protect what you've built. So I totally get that. You want to protect that, set on it, own it, and run that for a long time. And like change disrupts that because it's just kind of like, oh no, we've got this thing and we don't. But it's like you can't stop people from helping people. Like that's not a real and viable like opinion,
Well, people change. It's interesting. Like I had like 12 people in my office when back in 2012 or 13, we were running this produce company doing 1,000 deliveries, a week. And when Facebook came online, people stopped calling. They wanted to do more themselves. And so we had to create the tools for them to shop online themselves and place the order themselves. And and so all of a sudden, now I'm down to 3 people running 3 times the volume in my office because the systems are doing the things that people no longer want to do. Nobody just called. I mean, as much as I loved, Mike or Jim or whatever, there just wasn't anything for them to do in the office any longer because nobody wanted to use their phone, right? And so if you're not in our systems, and we created cross training across the board, right? And so with Cal, you can have somebody, literally, building buildings and also answering phones potentially, or walking north the system, because if somebody gets sick, you need to have somebody step back up. And so now you can have people using the tool in different ways. And then you unlock these talents you never knew happened because they didn't have a tool to use. And all of a sudden you find out that guy shouldn't be building for you. He should be actually answering phones or placing orders, or, you know what I mean? Like you just feel, man, that kid is good. at using these kinds of systems, but you don't know because you don't have the system in place for them to actually participate.
Comes down to being the shepherd, honestly, at the end of the day, Tristan, The Way of the Shepherd, a book that I got suggested to that I should read from a shed manufacturer. Just shepherding the flock and understanding them. On this last podcast, we talked about PI, the predictive index, to use as a tool to understand personality and different things like that. And there's a whole psychology that goes into that. And one of the most perfect examples before we end here today is what happens to great performing salespeople. You know what the number one thing is that happens to a great performing salesperson? Let's put them in charge because they know how to sell. But nothing says they know how to manage people, right? They know how to sell. And guess what happens? They usually keep selling because they want to sell, because they're good at it too. And people can't always learn the way they learn. They can't always have what it is they have. But it doesn't mean they're a people manager. And that's the trap we put ourselves into, because we're like, oh, they're good, go teach others. No one said they could teach. We just know they can sell. They might be a terrible teacher, and they usually end up put into a position it's not comfortable. So it's understanding your flock. It's being a shepherd that can do that, whatever those tools are to use it.
Hello, shed builders. I'd like to grab your attention for just a moment. As we look ahead to 2025, one thing is clear. Customers will have higher expectations than ever before. Shed consumers have an unprecedented access to information. To stay competitive, you need to create sheds that are not only high in quality, but also rich in innovation. You might recall my friend Dan Ream, one of my early podcast guests, who introduced Solar Blaster fans, specifically the Solar Roof Blaster. Dan has been busy handling orders, and he's eager to speak directly to shed builders about his groundbreaking products. What stands out to me about Dan's products designed specifically for sheds, like the Solar Roof Blaster and the Solar Light Blaster, is how they enhance the shed owner's experience. With the focus on quality, it's time to start thinking about adding features and benefits for the end user. Here at Shed Geek, we wholeheartedly recommend Solar Blaster as the solution. My favorite thing about the entire line of products? The support you'll receive from Dan. Not only is he incredibly knowledgeable about these products, but he's also one of the most customer-focused individuals I know. He truly stands behind both his product and his service. We're searching for companies ready to elevate customer satisfaction to the next level. To learn more, just visit solarblasterfans.com and fill out some basic information for a callback, or connect directly at 480-747-7097. You can also check out the Shed Geek newsletter, where a click on the Solar Blaster ad will guide you to a form for more information and some cool videos showcasing the products. Let's power up innovation and elevate customer experiences together.
Before we go, I just want to touch on this. We've got Monday show out now with Eric Olson and Jared Ledford over here at Dayton Barnes doing the Steel Kings podcast, and they're putting steel content out there. And I'm so happy to know that, and for people to acknowledge and just see the representation of, even though we're in the sheds and we're the Shed Geek podcast, right? Mm-hmm. We're one of the medias that are bringing you that content constantly. Right. There's more to sheds oftentimes than just meets the eye. And steel is, I know guys that got into selling sheds and they're now selling more steel than they are sheds, which is why some companies say, we don't want you to sell those products because it's competing with the business of ours, or it's taking your time and attention. And then there's others that are like, how do we bring this into a circle together and learn how to work in all these areas? You've accomplished that with the product. That's part of your value proposition, right?
We can do sheds, or we can do steel, or we can do shed steel, gazebos, decks, carports, and so depending on your model, we can serve you. It's rewarding to help somebody basically have a tool that helps them do their business, right? And that's what we're excited about, is like helping people do what they're passionate about, to do what they do really well. And of course, this side of heaven, nothing's perfect, right? Yeah. We're always going to be tweaking. Things aren't going to be 100%. But, stepping out into technology a little bit and making it easier for your team to do their job. I mean, we had one RTO company say, Tristan, I got introduced to this particular manufacturer because I get one contract a month from this guy at a garage, basically a gas station who sells a steel building every now and then. And he has to call me every time because he doesn't do it often enough. If he just had your system, he would never have to call me again because it's the same process. He logs in, gets his building, walks into the system. There's no paperwork for the guy to fill out at all. There's no, signatures, no back and forth. It's tied to a configurator, tied to his contract. He's like, oh my goodness, Tristan, the guys who do 1 or 2 buildings a month would benefit from having your system because it's just so simple to use. And I'm like, wow, you know what? I'm just glad I'm able to help you, serve your team, but also serve that person, because if it's easy for him to make a sale, he'll sell probably 3 or 4 now. Right. Because he's like, oh, I got to do this to sell that building. I got to do this and this and this. Now it's like, if it's just like 5 minutes, it's like, oh, he'll probably sell even more. Right. He'll unlock more.
There's a whole conversation to have there that opens up a can of worms of like, why is that guy selling if he's not engaged? But I'm going to leave that conversation alone because we're going to have you back on in the future for another time. Any shout outs, any thoughts, just anything that you want to share today? It's exciting. We're going into year 5 of the podcast, well over 300, free shows that you can listen to and glean from and hopefully learn from. And you've been a part of a number of those and hopefully a part of a number more of those. I just appreciate, like, sometimes even the conversations we have that are non-shed talk, talk about the grandbabies and just different things. And just
congratulations, by the way, on that second grandbaby on the way. That's really
super
cool.
Excited. I'm telling you, me and my wife are over the moon. We loved being parents, right? Yeah. And we love to be grandparents. Like, we enjoy it. It's something that we, my wife is just the best grandmother. She really is the best. She's a second mother to that baby. I swear, she just loves her to death, and she really. She's got that gift. I don't know how to explain it.
We have 10 and 11's on the way, and I've had to tell my kids, this generation, they don't want to tell you until they're sure, like 3 months into it, right? And then they don't want to. You can't tell anybody until they've told somebody on social media, right, that they're having. And then if their friends announce before they do, they got to wait another 2 weeks so they can have the limelight. I'm like, whatever.
Right.
I'm like, just don't tell me. Just don't tell me until I can tell somebody, please, because I just can't hold good news in like that. I just don't want to, like, so I'm like, just don't tell me until I can tell somebody, please, because
Yeah, I get it. No, I do. I totally get it. It's was exciting for us. She told us on Easter she brought Cecilia out in a shirt that said "Promoted to Big Sister," and I'm over here going, well, that's a stupid shirt. Why did she get her that shirt? She's not a big sister. She must have picked that up at a thrift shop or something. And all of a sudden it was like ding, ding, ding. And, it hits me. Oh, she's going to be a big sister. I was like, why? That shirt don't make any sense. So look, they're a blessing. And, like, honestly, you begin to get to a point in your life where you start to look at not what's ahead, but what's behind. And, that's a really special place to be. And it changes the way you do everything. I mean, after Deanna's, cancer diagnosis and everything she went through and all the chemo and all of that, it just changes your mindset on the way you do business. It changes the mindset on the way that you're around people. I mean, really, just friends, family, foes, all of it. Your mindset begins to, change. Getting to meet people in this industry like yourself and others that have just been such a bright light to us. Can't say enough good things about you. Appreciate Kyle for introducing us to you. I think initially at maybe one of the expos. So, because it's been a good relationship that's developed out of this. So, any thoughts that you want to share just with the industry before we go?
The industry, as business owner to business owner, Shannon, and I'm talking to the shed owners right now and the steel owners, you have to plan for the future. You have to look down the pipe and think, when am I going to exit? Because we're all going to exit. How am I going to set this up for the next generation or the next buyer? What processes can I put in place today to make it easier for my company to sell their buildings, manage the ordering process? You just have to be a planner. And, when you're 60, you're probably a little bit behind the 8 ball. but at 50, I would just say, start doing it. It's like, what Dave Ramsey would say, if you didn't start early, start now,
Yeah.
it's time, it's time. And I would like to be a part of those conversations. Even if you don't sign up for Cal, I'm happy to have a conversation about your next steps or how we could transition. I was talking to one of my dealers before I got on the call this morning, manufacturers, dealers, and he's like, Tristan, you just helped me go to the next step from a conversation we had, and I just want to, that for me is so rewarding. If I can just help you, unlock a little bit more of what you need to do down the road. That's like a pat in the back, right? Like, I'm happy to do that. You say, serve somebody? Yeah. How can I do that? How can I do that? And so like my lab, like, he gets the ball. Want to go for a walk? Ready to go. So for me, like, I would be happy to, even just have conversations with people who are thinking about the next steps. And even if it doesn't lead to a Cal sale, I'm fine with that, because in the end, if you're not quite ready, that's okay.
That's because you're a helper. You're a helper first, and helpers, always help. They can't stop that. They can't help themselves.
It's very true.
Helping others.
So start planning today, right? Start planning today for the exit strategy or the next thing you need to do in your business.
How do they reach you? How do they have this conversation?
Yeah, they can, go to our website, which is just calcanhelp.com, and you can click on one of Shannon's links on the advertising pages and get there. You can call me if you want to. It's 425-359-3279. I almost always pick up, and if I don't, I'll call you back, leave a voicemail. But mostly however you want to engage, email, phone, I'm happy to do that. Schedule a demo on our website. Can do that too. So, but anyway,
On that note, I want to say something that I've noticed here recently that we've been paying attention to, that we'll probably start to explore over the next several years. But on that advertising, guys, I can't insist enough that you guys create, any advertisers create a digital footprint so that you can kind of see where these leads are coming from. We get in front of the same people every time, and like, I'll look. And the other day I noticed, one of my advertisers got 13 clicks on their website, and I go to their website and I realized there's no way to track that. And I'm like, hey guys, you're missing out on a great opportunity. So it may not be that the people aren't listening, clicking, watching, wanting to know more information. It's maybe that you're not doing all that's necessary to gain, that digital footprint, because this isn't like guesswork. It's like, hey, I can see someone went here, clicked here, spent this much time on, and then wanted to know more about it. So I just can't encourage people enough to, one, go sign up for that newsletter. We want to start creating some blogs. And Tristan, if you want to write some, anybody in the industry, if you want to write some, put some stuff in there, stuff that's helpful to the industry. It doesn't even have to be like a sales approach. Like, I'm trying to sell you something here. It's like, hey, this is information. That's what the podcast is. It's just information, So I wanted to point that out. Like I love to see people go and like know where those leads came from, and like, we want to bring you business. That's why we do what we do. If you're paying money, we want to show you value. So
closing the marketing loop is super important. Knowing where your dollars got spent and how it returned to you. The reason why we're talking about succession planning today, even a little bit, is that the people who click on my emails that I send out are 55 to 65-year-old males. They are. We just know that they're thinking about, how to make their operations more modern, potentially streamlined, and probably thinking about their exit strategy, and so we want to serve them.
Well, especially with this recent, acquisition / collaboration with Shed Hub that we've done to bring the e-commerce part into sort of our platform, like, we've acquired so many more emails now, like we're just, we're seeing a network of 5,000 or 6,000 people these emails go out to 2-3 times a week. So, they want to go places, learn more, know more. And like, we want to be, part of that media that brings it to them. We're the only one in this space right at the moment. I know that I'm sure there'll be more, but like, we're in that space, and we want to help. We want to help you. We want to help the listener. We want to help everybody, because we want to serve too. So I just can't say enough. Thank you for being on here. They can go to calcanhelp.com. They can go click on the links. If you got a question, we'll get you in touch with anybody. We're happy to do that. I'm just thankful that, to have your friendship and to get to know you excited to see you going places in this new
Yeah.
this new
We're going to see
transaction hub. I like it.
you in September at the Shed Expo.
Yep,
Yep, we got a
we'll be
chance
there.
to see you in person. We look forward to that. All right, Shannon, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for this time, though.
I want to do one thing because I always ask, and like I've had so many people say, I've even had a couple, and I'm driving this point home on purpose. We're never going to stop saying that we love Jesus on the podcast. We're not going to do it for advertising dollars. We're not going to do it for marketing business, RTO business, finance business, Shed Up business. I don't care what it is. We're never going to stop saying that. So I'm just excited that one, you love Jesus and you're an advertiser with us. So I know you feel the same way. And for that reason, I'm going to ask you to pray if you don't mind so that we can get out of here today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that. All right, let's pray. Father, I want to thank you for relationships and the importance of relationships, Lord, and next generations. And in the industry, as it transitions, as there's uncertainty, we just ask that you would just give the community wisdom on, their next steps, on how to do pricing, how to serve their teams, and how to serve the customer in front of them. And so we just thank you for these opportunities to serve people and to help them get the right buildings, help them have the right processes, help them to, strengthen relationships. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Appreciate you. We all got places to be and go, but it means a lot that you're on here. And I'm wishing you nothing but continued success in 2025, Tristan. So,
all right. Thank you so much, Shannon.
right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks again, ShedPro, for being the Shed Geeks studio sponsor for 2025. If you need any more information about ShedPro or about ShedGeek, just reach out. You can reach us by email at info@shedgeek.com or just go to our website, www.shedgeek.com, and submit a form with your information, and we'll be in contact right away. Thank you again for listening, as always, to today's episode of the Shed Geek Podcast. Thank you and have a blessed day.